Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming this evening to the Thursday, November 21st meeting of the San Francisco Commission of Animal Control and Welfare. Can I have the roll call, please?
Yes, this is Commissioner Iran. Anne Marie Fortier.
Present.
Bunny Rosenberg.
Present.
Russell Snofsky.
Present.
Brian Van Horn.
Present.
Michael Torres.
Present.
Jane Tobin.
Present.
Sherry O'Neill. Lisa Wayne.
Yeah, not here.
Brian Crockett.
Not here. Thank you. General public comment. Members of the public may address the Commission with comments or recommendations on items within the Commission's jurisdiction other than items on the agenda at the beginning or the end of the meeting, but not both. Is there any general public comment?
Maybe May, since the issue of feral moms and kittens is not on the agenda, unfortunately, I understand it will be next month. I just want to say how important this is as an ongoing issue. I keep tracking in situations where I find out too late about the kittens, and the kittens are too old to trap because they've already gone in search of a mate somewhere, or they're dead, or they've been hit by cars. So it's really, really important to focus on getting the mothers and the kittens into foster homes so that all those kittens will be saved 100%. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other further public comment?
Hi, I'm Maria Conlon, and just want to say again the same thing, since the feral mom and kitten item is not on the agenda, we still support that the feral moms and kittens are able to go into foster, and we want to make sure that it doesn't drop off indefinitely off the agenda, and interested in participating if possible in communications with the supervisors with you, if that's possible to do, to learn more about that. We actually met with the supervisors aide today, and she recommended that that was possible. So anyways, we just want to continue to support that, because right now we're not in kitten season, although there are a few kittens out there. We just got one trapped last night, and but starting in April again, we will be full force with hunts and kittens and mating more finds. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to agree that since it's not on the agenda, the feral cat and mom issue, that the old policy I believe should be reinstated. It's wrong to leave moms and their babies out on the street when people are willing to foster them. Whether they get hit by cars, killed by predators, die of diseases, the policy doesn't make sense. And this is going to end with more stray cats, more feral cats on the street if it's not back to how it used to be.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Thank you. Moving on. on to the approval of the draft minutes from the October 2019 meeting. Did anyone have comments or corrections about the meeting minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Minutes are approved. Any comment on the minutes? Moving on, thank you. Chairperson and Commissioners' reports. Commissioners' reports regarding recent activities in the community involving animal issues that have been discussed by the Commission in the past. Do any Commissioners have updates for us?
So Commissioner Van Horn and I actually met with the director of SPCA's Community Cats Program, and so we wanted to give an update there. We met about a month ago. It was pretty informative, and we do have some good news to share as far as what they're doing to move the program forward. They are moving towards a foster model for caring for the feral moms and nursing kittens, which seems to be, from our discussions over the past few months, it seems to be the best form of care. And the SPCA is basically saying they're taking ownership for medical issues and adoption and all the other issues that might arise. Their new model includes working on a mentorship program for finders.
Could you speak a little bit louder?
Sure. A mentorship program for finders that will include helping them so that potentially, they can help these families stay in place. Also building and training a foster network. They started with a feasibility survey to see who's available to mentor and foster, and also providing resources like food for the families. And they're also working with ACC and other volunteers on a guiding coalition so that there will be consistent standards across the city as far as, if somebody calls in, what to do, how the family should be treated, so they know that consistency is an issue. And that includes sharing the volunteer pool between SPCA and ACC so that everybody is following the same guidelines. And the last thing the last thing that I would like to report on is the timeline for bringing them in has moved from 4 weeks to 3 weeks.
So that was the majority of what they told us. A few other comments that they just wanted to put on the record. The SPCA does feel that the rollout of the new queen kitten policy was lacking in public education, and that was a factor that caused a great deal of the current controversy. The SPCA feels that the current controversy regarding queens and kittens is fueled by other long-standing debates about operations at SPCA and ACC. The SPCA feels that so far the first kitten season under the new protocol has been acceptable for the management of queens and kittens in the field. SPCA has no current plans to reverse the policy, but rather they plan to improve it. SPCA currently does have the volunteer system that can provide foster care for queens and kittens that need to be removed from the outdoors, and Ina said they are working on expanding these capabilities in case it's needed. Currently, the SPCA has no current plans for a unified protocol for Good Samaritans contacting ACC, SPCA, or SF independent rescue groups, but they recognize that that's a deficiency. SPCA management of TNR operations continues to make it open to all of their treatment, continues to make open all of their treatment and treatments and follow-up plans are the best among the best in the country. They altered almost 230 cats this year so far, and however, these current numbers do not necessarily all represent cats from inside the city of SF. They know that some of these numbers could be animals that are brought into the city for the TNR project. They operate the CCTP database that they recognize as the only source for any ongoing monitoring in the city's outdoor cat population. They do know that it's in need of updating, and it doesn't currently include data obtained from anyone other than themselves. The database is not available for direct review by ACC, City Hall staff, Commission members, or interested members of the general public. However, it should be noted that when specific statistics were requested, the staff was responsive. And the database is not managed under a protocol that ACC or the city has any oversight in. So these were some of the takeaways from our meeting for when this comes up again in the future.
Okay, well, as this was not an agenda item, we were not aware that there was significant, I would say there was quite a bit of new information regarding the feral cats policies. We were not aware that there was as much information, and because this is not an agenda item, we must limit our discussions. My understanding was that we did not have much new information, that things were proceeding with discussions between ACC, SPCA, commissioners, and supervisors, but it seems that more discussions were happening than I was aware of. At any rate, this is certainly something that we intend to put on the discussion for January. As was pointed out, with the current kitten season coming to a close and another one on the horizon, I will say personally, I think it's important that the stakeholders come together and reach some sort of agreement on how to proceed moving forward. And that will be a top priority for this commission beginning in January. Commissioners, did anyone have any other comments, any other outstanding or issues we have addressed in the past that you would like to comment on?
Not an issue, but I just want to make sure that the public's aware we do not have a December meeting. Someone said something about next month. So our next meeting will be in January.
Correct. Next meeting is in January. There's not a December meeting. Okay. Is there any public comment regarding the chairperson's comments and updates? No, moving on. Thank you. New business. Enforcement of California's animal cruelty law and exposure of farm animal cruelty. Commissioner Irani, would you like to introduce this?
Sure. So for this topic, our speaker is Mr. Jonathan Frohnmeyer. He is legal counsel and organizer for Direct Action Everywhere, which is an animal rights organization that works to take nonviolent direct action to help animals, including rescuing animals from and exposing cruelty at commercial farming operations, which we will be hearing about tonight. And Mr. Frohnmeyer has prepared a presentation in support of a proposed resolution that he is asking our commission to consider in support of activists working to expose cruelty, enforcement of our state animal cruelty statute, legislation to expand protection for animals, and a commitment to protect all animals from suffering and harm. And I will let Mr. Frohnmeyer take it from here.
Thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners. And thank you so much to all of you for being here, and to Commissioner Irani for facilitating this presentation and this resolution. So as Commissioner Irani said, I'm John Frohnmeyer. I'm an attorney and organizer with the Grassroots Network Direct Action Everywhere, or DXE. And I wanted to make this presentation to give you all some context for what our group is about, the legal argument that we are trying to put forward, and the actions that led to that are leading to the prosecution that has prompted this resolution. So first, Direct Action Everywhere. At DXE, we are aiming essentially to make this world a significantly better place for animals in our lifetimes, in one generation. And we do that by putting on major mobilization events, such as this image here, which shows 1,000 individuals outside of this city hall earlier this year. We tell the stories of animals who have been rescued from places of exploitation and violence, and we engage mainstream journalists to start understanding and writing about issues that affect non-human animals. This is Amy Goodman and Glenn Greenwald, both of whom have spoken at our conferences and done numerous pieces in the media discussing a DXE rescue on Democracy Now! Relating to a facility that used eagles for experimentation. And I imagine that I don't need to give much context on the law regarding animals, but the two most crucial sections that we focus on are California Penal Code Section 597B, which criminalizes the neglect of animals, denial to them of food and water and proper shelter, and Penal Code Section 597E, which grants limited rights to any person to enter into a pound, the original definition of which was any enclosure for animals, to supply animals who have been denied food and water with the same. And both of these code sections are recited in the resolution. And our campaign for the last several years has been to document places that violated these code sections, and we did so. And in this March 19, 2018 letter, we listed a number of facilities that we believe were committing criminal animal cruelty, and we sent it to authorities all over the state, including 8 district attorneys. And because a number of these facilities were located in Sonoma County, we especially focused on sending it to authorities there, including the sheriff, Petaluma Animal Shelter, Sonoma County Animal Services, among others. And I'm going to play a clip that was included in this, and I also want to warn folks that I'm going to show some images and some videos of animals suffering and animals dying, so I just wanted to give a content warning before doing so. And this is a facility called Sunrise Farms. After not hearing back after repeated attempts to engage law enforcement, we consulted with Hadar Aviram, who's a professor of criminal law at UC Hastings, who rendered us in May of 2018 this legal opinion, which argues that if a commercial facility or any person essentially leaves an animal to die from thirst or starvation or injury, then anyone is authorized to enter into that facility pursuant to the doctrine of legal necessity and Penal Code Section 597E to give that animal the care that they need, and if necessary, remove that animal. And on the advice of that council, approximately 500 individuals went to Sunrise, again, the same place where we shot that, where the B-roll footage that I just played was shot at. And we walked onto the property. Almost immediately, we saw animals who were dead out, simply just lying outside, who've been left for dead. We put on industry standard biosecurity gear, and we walked inside of the facility. We documented more cases where animals had simply been left to die. Here are 2 images. And we opened the cages to see if there were animals who were on the verge of death. And we found a number of them, and we walked out with those animals. The authorities were called, and they moved all the activists from private property to the road. And we engaged in negotiation with them and with the owner of the farm to do an inspection and remove any other animals we could find. The farm owner placed on us the condition that there would be no further media, no more videos, no more photographs of the facility. We didn't feel like we could accept that condition, and so 40 of the activists non-violently attempted to cross the police line, and all were arrested. So some 500 activists were involved. 37 birds, all of whom were on the verge of death, were removed and taken to a vet and placed on a sanctuary. 40 individuals were arrested. Subsequent to this action, I and another attorney from our network went to Sonoma County. We met with the county council, members of the sheriff's department, and several other government officials. And we explained our position that there was rampant criminal animal cruelty going on in that county. And their response was that these facilities are regulated and they follow industry standards. We responded that industry standards are not a safe harbor under the law. It's the people, the voters of California who determine what the law is, not the industry. And they told us, well, I'm sorry, but there's just simply nothing that we can do. And since then, it's actually become quite clear that leaving animals to die actually itself violates industry standards, despite the fact that it's widespread. And we've included a recital to that effect with a proper citation in this resolution. And after receiving no further assurances that any action would be taken by authorities, another 120 activists went back to Sonoma County, this time to a facility that's run by Peddling Poultry. The name is McCoy's Poultry Services. And we undertook a very similar set of actions there. We actually set up a temporary medical supply tent on the property. We documented many of the same things. This is a bird who was just inches away from food. Many of these animals, while ostensibly are supplied with food and water, can't reach it because they have broken bones or they're sick. And this is apparently what happened to this one bird here. We walked out with 10 birds. By that time, the sheriff at Sonoma County had already stopped us, and they asked us which is the sickest bird. And we identified one. This is her. Her name is Rose. And the sheriff allowed the activist carrying her to leave the property. And Rose lived for a year on a sanctuary and recently died. As for the other 9 birds, all were confiscated by the sheriff. All 58 activists who were on private property, myself included, although I had never actually entered into a shed, were arrested. And those 9 birds were impounded by Sonoma County Animal Services. And as a result of this action, Sonoma County elected to file felony charges against 6 of the activists, myself included. There doesn't appear to be any relationship between who was charged with felonies and who wasn't, except that the county seemed to want to go after those they perceived as in leadership. And the charges came despite the fact that the case report from Sonoma County Animal Services, which subsequently euthanized all of those 9 birds, actually listed the owner of the farm as a suspect for animal cruelty. You see here, it mentions his name for violating Penal Code Section 597. A link to this whole report is included in the resolution. And that report also described in detail the condition of the birds. It states here that none were able to stand on their own. They were all stressed and panting. And one bird had a lesion that was so large that you could see her bone and muscle tissue. But notwithstanding this report, charges were filed against us. To the best of our knowledge, no action has ever been taken to investigate this or any other commercial facility in Sonoma County. And while our case has been ongoing, we have continued to reach out to authorities across the state. This is another letter that was sent to the Sonoma County District Attorney. It includes a number of the references previously sent, and as well as a reference to a facility called Reichardt Duck Farm that was investigated by Mercy for Animals in 2014, and no meaningful action was taken by the authorities there. And I'm going to show another clip from that facility. This particular clip was not sent to the authorities, but to us it clearly shows more criminal animal cruelty. distressing for me. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, where there are ducks everywhere, enjoying the ponds and the rivers, and ducks they're evolved to love the water and to be in water, and these ducks spend their entire lives on these metal crates. It's just truly disturbing. And so, again, after receiving no response, earlier this year, 600 activists went to this farm, and this time it's also a slaughterhouse. And a number of activists chained themselves to the slaughter equipment and to the front gate. Our ask was simple: if you're willing to inspect this facility with us and document cruelty, we will happily unlock ourselves right now. They refused and spent approximately 4 hours meticulously cutting all of these activists out. But 32 birds were removed and again placed on a sanctuary. And a total of 80 individuals, some of whom overlapped from prior actions, were arrested. There have been about 148 unique arrests in this county. No new felony charges were filed after this action, but the prior 6 people who were facing felony charges received additional charges. All of us are facing either 7 or 8 felonies that carry approximately 10 years in prison. And the reason that we are here, we know that different branches of government are always reluctant to second guess the realms of other branches of government. We think it's appropriate here because fundamentally this is a political prosecution. We're not facing felony charges because we are dangers to our fellow human beings. We're facing felony charges because we are exposing systemic abuse by major public interests. And unfortunately, we are having to fight this legal battle on their turf, despite the fact that this conduct affects everybody in the entire state, especially people here in San Francisco, because this is where people in the city buy so many of these products, I use that term with reluctance, from Sonoma County. And we think we have a very colorful legal argument, both about animal cruelty law and about laws that give Good Samaritans the right to provide aid. And it's simply not fair that we're having to put our freedom and our futures on the line to bring these arguments to the public's attention. We could have been simply sued for the economic damages that we ostensibly caused, but the county elected to file actual felony charges that could result in us going to prison. We think that's not fair, and we just ask this commission and ultimately the San Francisco Board of Supervisors to weigh in on this issue and say, no, the industry and the authorities in rural counties need to be honest about what the law is and admit that there is a problem, and from there we can start working on a solution. But simply sweeping the problem under the rug by putting good people in prison is not the right path for democracy. And with that, I and several of my co-defendants are here, and we would be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you so much for listening.
From the industry standpoint, has anybody made any public statements from any of the corporations that are buying from or managing these farms that were involved?
They've been relatively silent. I mean, the owners of the farms, so Vice made a documentary and they interviewed the owner of Sunrise, and he stated that we have made changes in response to this, but the way the activists went about it was the wrong way.
And do we know who Sunrise is distributing for? Most of these poultry producers are small cog in a bigger machine.
Yes. So Sunrise supplies to Whole Foods, and Petaluma Poultry supplies to Purdue and Amazon.
I have a few questions. So before this action was taken, I know that you made attempts to notify authorities and no action was taken. How did you choose these specific facilities?
Well, I mean, the main reason was proximity to where we are, but our, and the fact that Sonoma County products are distributed throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, Berkeley, San Francisco. We've done investigations, though, all across the state. in Stanislaus County and in other counties. We've also, and members of our network have done investigations all across the world.
And just as a follow-up, I'm sorry, has there been any notification to Purdue, Amazon, Whole Foods about any of this from you to date?
Yes, there has indeed. We've actually been attempting to talk with Whole Foods for the last 4 or 5 years or so, and we've also spent the last several years trying to communicate with Amazon, and we did send Amazon a letter that contained a link to the animal control report that concerned their supplier. We have not heard back.
So you haven't heard back from any of the above other than Whole Foods?
That's right. Well, and Whole Foods has actually not been willing to actually speak with us about any of these issues either.
Other than the one facility that was in the Vice documentary, have any other facilities done anything after these actions were taken, like remedial actions or changes, or do you know?
Not to our knowledge.
Okay.
No, not to our knowledge.
And following on that, given that you were told that what is happening in these facilities are industry standard, it doesn't appear that if changes were made within the facilities that there would be a requirement to disclose them. Is that correct?
That's correct. And another issue that we have uncovered through Public Records Act requests is that there really is no enforcement command in the state of California for animal cruelty law violations that occur on commercial facilities. We actually spoke with the Sonoma County Sheriff and said, where do you get reports? Initially they said we get them from animal control. And then they said, actually, we don't get them from animal control. We rely on the CDFA to report cruelty to us. And then when we reached out to the CDFA for any records for the last 5 years of any animal cruelty violations they've reported to any law enforcement agency, the answer came back 0.
What is CDFA?
The California Department of Food and Agriculture, which is also the agency that's been tasked with enforcing Proposition 12, and they have currently released regulations that are subject to public comment right now.
Has there been any contact with USDA APHIS and any of their limited number of inspectors about whether or not these places have been reported or on the radar before?
Well, yes, we have requested public records from the USDA, and there are no such reported violations.
But they also didn't tell you if they've ever been inspected, which they probably have.
I believe that's correct. I'm not certain.
I have a question. In addition to asking for a resolution from the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, have you reached out to any other cities or any other counties as well with
We have. So the Berkeley's Peace and Justice Commission passed a very similar resolution to this on September 9th, and that's currently going to be voted on at the full Berkeley City Council on December 10th.
And what about at the state level? What's being done there since, this is a state cruelty?
Sure. So we are in contact with a number of assembly members and senators, and we've had lengthy conversations about animal cruelty, and we're talking about a variety of different potential solutions to some of the issues that we've documented. Yeah. And we've also spoken with the Attorney General's office.
And as a legal question, and I know this is probably uncharted territory, but A, how long do proceedings and charges like this take to actually come to fruition? And B, since the initial charges were levied, has there been any follow-up by prosecutors?
Do we follow up about?
On the felonies and misdemeanors that have already been filed? Is it anything more at this point other than charges are filed, or have they actually set court dates for hearings, etc.?
Sure. So regarding the length of criminal trials, it can vary. I think standard would be 1 to 2 years, but some cases get postponed and postponed for many years. Our charges came down in October of 2018, And we have, two of us have a preliminary hearing set for December 19th and December 20th, and the other 4 have a preliminary hearing on January 10th. And the purpose of that hearing is to show beyond, or by preponderance of the evidence that the defendant committed the crime, and then whatever charges survive that burden are then set for trial based on beyond a reasonable doubt standard. So it's hard to say. I think our actual trial could be sometime next spring, next summer.
Are there any further questions by commissioners? I believe this is a lot of information for us to take in. My proposal would be to consider this and have a discussion in January. That's our next meeting. I think it's a bit much for us to get a handle on this evening, but if others have a different opinion, I would like to hear it. No opinions?
If we do that, I'd certainly like to know what transpires between now and then for continued discussion at that point.
Right, specifically what, it sounds like Berkeley is awaiting the approval of this resolution by the entire board, is that correct?
That's correct.
And there might be a couple of other things that we could follow up on in January and go through this document and decide at that point how to proceed.
The hearings in December and January, what's going to happen with those potentially?
Yeah, those are preliminary hearings, so it's a more limited proceeding, and the government has a lower standard to prove. It's just preponderance of the evidence, so more likely than not. And so if we lose on some of those charges there, then we'll face them again at trial. The burden on the state will be beyond a reasonable doubt.
Would it be possible for you to share the Berkeley dates with us and information and meeting times too? I'd like to actually go and listen in on that as well.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you intend to attend that hearing?
We do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this issue? Yes, please come forward. If you have a comment, please come forward. You could line up on the side to facilitate the movement. Thank you.
Nadine May. I've been an animal activist for a long time, vegetarian for a long time, and vegan for 20 years. But I have never had the courage to go on any of these, what would you call them?
You call us an activist, an advocate.
No, but I haven't had the courage to actually go along with you guys to look and rescue. And I want to thank everybody who dares to do that, because I'm a wimp and I haven't done it. And thank you all for doing what you're doing.
Bless your heart.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Patricia Briggs, and I have the greatest respect for DXC. They have really strong ideologies. They're believers. They're incredible activists. They're the best. We've gone on marches with them in both Berkeley and as has Nadine. And I just wanted to mention that I took a class at the Marine Humane Society. It was ages ago. It was a humane class. And there's a really, I saw a lot of the literature of some of the cases that they investigated. And I guess, obviously, there's a lot more of these facilities in Sonoma, but Marine Humane Society did do a lot of investigations of horse cruelty and hoof stock. So maybe that's a thought. There was a wonderful woman, a state humane officer, her name was Cindy Machado, M-A-C-H-A-D-O. And she's been an activist for 30 years. She's attended all kinds of meetings of, animal forums and whatever. So perhaps she would be an idea of contacting her, because it's just really boggles the mind that, there's institutionalized cruelty. These people are committing, just doing monstrous things, and the people that are trying to keep them from doing it are the ones that are being penalized. It's mind-boggling. So just want to say if we could maybe contact Marin Humane Society.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Almira, and I'm one of the felony defendants, so one of John's co-defendants, and I just wanted to thank you for hearing this resolution. And I think someone mentioned like these farms are maybe like small pegs in a bigger system, but if you've actually been to these farms and seen like the drone footage of it, they have sometimes dozens of barns, over 100,000 birds in one facility, 10,000 or more birds in a single barn. Like the scale of these facilities is so large, and they do supply to some of the largest retailers like Safeway, where you can go see Rocky and Rosie Chicken with the smiling cartoon image, and yet that's the footage that we saw there. And I think it's really powerful when a city like San Francisco takes a stand and says like this is not okay, because what you all say has great weight in the state. And as we've seen with the incredible success of the fur ban, it started in Berkeley, it went to San Francisco, and now it's statewide, and all of these other states are thinking about it. And what we do here to protect animals really does have an impact way beyond just San Francisco. So I thank you for hearing this resolution, and I hope that you have a lot of time to think about it, and maybe we'll see you on December 10th in Berkeley. Thanks.
Hi, I will be brief because Almira made most of my points. But my name is Cassie King, and I'm another of the 6 felony defendants. And I'm really grateful that you all exist and that this group exists, because we actually have already started talking to members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, notably Matt Haney, who actually is his office, who suggested to us that this would be a good place to start with the resolution and get it to the full Board of Supervisors. So having your credibility and having your support would go so far to, like Almira said, influence the entire world. And that's why I'm so proud to be a resident of the Bay Area. That's why I'm so proud to be involved in what I think is the next social justice movement to sweep the world. So just please help us be a part of it. And if you have any questions before January, we're always happy to answer them. So you can reach out anyway. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matthew Dempsey. I've been a resident of San Francisco for about 10 years. I'm not one of the felony defendants, but I was arrested at 2 of the 3 actions that were mentioned in John's presentation. I just wanted to ask you as a resident to strongly support my friends who are facing those charges. I think San Francisco's stance on fur ban has been very powerful in influencing other cities in the state and hopefully the rest of the country. And I would really like to see the same start here as well. I remember coming to one of these commission meetings when the fur ban was being discussed, and being very proud of the stance that all of you took on that. Just asking for the same here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jordan Davis, she, her. I'm a District 6 resident and a newly minted member of DXC. I haven't been involved with DXC that long, but I certainly love their bravery and their tenacity in doing this. And I just want to put a call out to agendize this resolution and to pass it as soon as possible. So yeah, so let's chart some uncharted waters and get this done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Rocky, and like Jordan, I'm a District 6 resident of San Francisco. I'm going to keep mine short as well because everyone else before me have made the points super well. But I believe that this resolution that we need to consider in San Francisco, as others mentioned, carries great weight, not only in the state but in the nation. I grew up in like the early 2000s, and if you all remember, like it was like San Francisco led most nobly in the way of getting gay marriage to be legal nationwide, and it started 2003 when a bold mayor of the city legalized it and started a national conversation. And, I thought that was very inspiring and made me very proud, to be a San Francisco resident, and still does. And I think this is another great opportunity to be a trailblazer in the social justice movement and getting this resolution passed. So with that said, please do consider this, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm not involved with direct action everywhere, but I've been involved with farm animal rescue and investigating factory farms, not so much recently, but every time I've been into a factory farm, mostly hay farms and poultry farms, like, it's horrific. There's animals with gaping wounds, starving, animals eating rotting corpses. The fact that it's totally reasonable for a resolution to be passed to support people who are trying to provide aid for those animals. It's not asking so much. These people are putting their freedom on the line to help animals who never even existed because they're suffering and dying invisible deaths, which is very connected to the reason I'm here with sheltering animals. And I think, I hope the Commission will support the resolution and move it forward.
Thank you. Any further comment? Seeing none, we will continue with our agenda items and review this important issue in January. Thank you. New business. GGNRA proposed changes. This is review of the changes to GGNRA dog walking regulations. Sally Stevens of SF Dog will speak again. Thank you, Sally, for being here.
Hi. I have a PowerPoint thing, and I don't know how to get this thing to work. So, if it does, if not, I can just.
That's the public one, right?
Yeah. I apologize for the. Yeah. What is that? I'm a math person. I'm not a.
I get it all. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. So yeah, the GGNRA has come up with the compendium. Brief timeline is to be very brief about dog walking in the GGNRA. 1972, the GGNRA was established. In 79, they established a pet policy which allowed off-leash dog walking in 1% of their land. In 2011, they released a draft management plan that would severely restrict where you could walk with a dog. In 2015, our coalition of dog groups submitted a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request for documents. They released a draft rule, and then we had to file a lawsuit to compel release of documents, which they did ultimately give us. December 27, 2016, they announced they would implement the final rule on January 2017, and literally a few days before then, we put all of the information we found out through our FOIA lawsuit online on a website called WikiLeaks. We found they used a private email server to collude with groups that were opposed to dog walking. There was bias against dog walking and people who walk with dogs, and And a lot of the process was not fairly done. And so in October 2017, they withdrew the plan, which said the 7 acre policy is the rule of the land. And then, to our surprise, the weekend before Labor Day, they released a superintendent's compendium that changes parts of the 7 acre policy and implements parts of the withdrawn dog plan. Compendiums are supposed to be for minor corrections or minor changes to management policies. There's nothing minor in the changes that a compendium makes for people walking with dogs. And federal regulations and federal court rulings have made it clear that significant and highly controversial changes to public use cannot be made by administrative fiat, which is what the compendium is. They can only be made as a result of a notice and comment rulemaking process, which is what had gone on with the dog management plan. This is not that kind of a process. Federal regulations also require the superintendent to include written justifications for any changes made in a compendium, which this does not have. There's no evidence presented that there's been any underlying change in sort of on-the-ground conditions that might require the changes that they're proposing. And it's essentially implementing parts of the withdrawn dog management plan, and in addition, not related to dogs, but it also restricts where you can engage in First Amendment activities. So just some examples of the changes. At Fort Funston, if you read what it says that you can walk your dogs off leash, and those portions depicted it's on a map, basically what they're saying. That dogs are not allowed in the habitat protection area, in signed restoration areas, or in park service and partner administrative operational areas. Those last two, the signed restoration areas and the other areas, are new. The habitat protection area has been closed after a public notice and comment process years ago. So this is a map of dog walking from the 2017 compendium, the previous one. And basically everything that's yellow is where you can walk your dog off leash. There's that sort of orange cross-hatched area, which is the habitat protection area, where you cannot walk your dogs. Actually, people aren't allowed there either. It's not just dogs. In the compendium, however, they add this little area a little bit south of that. The habitat protection area is sort of the top gray area, and then underneath it there's a second gray area. That's an area that has been fenced for a number of years, but was never officially, it never went through the notice and comment rulemaking process to close that. And the real concern is that by saying that, and the way it says it just assigned for sensitive restoration areas, all they have to do literally to close an area to off-leash dog walking at Fort Funston or really anywhere else is to put up a sign that says sensitive restoration area. They don't have any proof that it actually is that they're doing anything, that they're saving, and they just put up the sign, they can do that. They've essentially not argued at that point with us when we've met with them. So it's clear that that's what they want to do. And the end result of all that is that essentially over time they can put up another sensitive restoration area. Here's another one, and then over a certain period of time, where suddenly there'll be basically no dog walking allowed at Fort Funston or really anywhere else. There's also major changes in San Mateo County. There's three sites where they have made changes to where you can walk your dog, where San Mateo is only on leash. So there's no off-leash dog walking in San Mateo County right now, but there's on-leash dog walking, there's trails that they've restricted. So here's just a real quick thing. It's a little hard to see, I apologize. The Malaga Ridge is an area, this map is from the No Action Alternative from the Dog Management Plan. That's basically what are the current existing conditions. And you can see the blue lines are trails where leash dog walking is allowed. So you can see pretty much all the trails in Malaga, they allow dogs to be on leash. This is from the compendium. And the main thing to notice is that this area that's sort of in a little, looks like home plate a little bit, says North Coast County Water District. That's the area that's actually owned by the North Coast County Water District, but is administered by the GGNRA. And that area in existing is listed as being on leash. In the compendium, it's listed as being no dogs. Anywhere where leash dogs are allowed would be blue, and those areas are now listed as black or gray. So basically, from the southern end of of the park entrance, you're not going to be able to get access to trails if you have a dog and go all the way around to the northern entrance and that sort of thing. That's a major impact. I would say that's significant and highly controversial. Morey Point is another place, and again, you can see, this is from the dog management plan, this is existing conditions, and you can see all the trails that are blue, which means leash, you can walk your dogs on leash there. The compendium, however, there's two trails, the Morey Point, or Morey Bluff Trail, which is the one along the coast, and then one at the bottom, I can't pronounce it. Anyway, there's another trail they're now black dashed dots, not blue. Those trails are both being closed to people with dogs. They're dashed lines now because they're considered unmaintained, but they're not restricting people from walking on them, just people with dogs. And the Bluff Trail is one of the most popular trails at Morey Point. So that, again, it's a significant controversial change, and they can't just do that by administrative fiat. At Rancho Corral de Tierra, as a result, in 2013, there was an agreement that allowed dogs to be off-leash anywhere in Rancho Corral de Tierra until the dog management plan was finalized. This was an agreement between Congresswoman Jackie Spear and the then Superintendent Frank Dean. But the dog management plan was withdrawn. That means that this agreement is still in effect. So you can walk your dog anywhere. You can basically, what this is saying, you can go between trails if you want. Most people don't, but if you want, you could. The compendium basically says you can only walk your dogs on the trails. So again, that's a significant change. In meetings with them, they have argued that that's not what they're saying, that they're just saying this is where they would prefer you walk, but anyone who looks at this is going to say this is saying you can't walk other places. So again, these are significant, highly controversial changes. They can't be made by administrative fiat. There's also changes in the definition of terms related to dog walking, but there's no explanation of what changes were made. For example, the definition of unmanaged dogs. In 2017, it was pretty straightforward, pretty simple. 2019, as you can read, it goes into a lot of detail about what this all means. And basically, this language is so overly broad that almost any behavior by any dog could be construed to fit this definition of unmanaged. Two dogs that are playing often chase one another. There's no aggression involved, there's no threats involved. But in theory, you could read this and say, chasing is one of the things listed, therefore the dog is unmanaged. And an unmanaged dog, is basically, you can be cited for having and things like that. So you don't want your dog to be considered unmanaged. The other issue with this definition is it talks about in a manner that a reasonable person would find, and then goes on to everyone else. What is a reasonable person? Someone who knows dogs, grew up with dogs, quite reasonable, might see two dogs interacting and go, oh, isn't that cute, they're playing. Someone who didn't grow up with dogs, doesn't understand dog behavior, might look at those same dogs and even though they're a perfectly reasonable person, go, they're fighting. And so it's, those are extremes, but the point is that what does reasonable person mean? That's just, the standard is just not a good thing to be putting in a definition. And basically this is giving park rangers essentially unbounded discretion to subjectively decide what is acceptable dog behavior. And park rangers do not have the training or the experience or qualifications to properly do that. When the final rule for the dog management plan was being considered, the SPCA wrote a comment opposing it. And they made this is a direct quote from their comment, page 3. National Park Service employees are not normally trained as animal control officers and therefore lack the expertise to determine which dog behaviors are undesirable and to effectively enforce the proposed rule. That also applies with the compendium. That definition, by the way, is basically taken from the dog management plan. So that's one of the things they're trying to implement from that. The definition of voice control, again, 2017, perfectly reasonable. If the dog is under control and it's within earshot, basically it's nearby. And just as an aside, SF Dog completely believes that you should have your dog under control. We do not in any way support people that have their dogs just running crazy and that sort of stuff. If you have your dog off leash, it should be under your voice command. But the 2019 compendium goes into a little more detail, and it talks about that you have to respond immediately, as the other one did too, but again, what does immediate mean? But this then takes one step further and says that you have to be, if an authorized person, meaning a park ranger, asks you to demonstrate that the dog has recall, you have to do it. And this is not with your dog doing anything wrong, it's just to do it. And so there are actually some due process concerns about this as well. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say exactly that, but that is a major concern that people have. And again, this seems to be somewhat intended to harass people by having a ranger being able to come up to just anybody like, show your immediate recall. And then, Fluffy, come. Fluffy. And then Fluffy comes. Is that immediate? To the ranger, it could be when you said Fluffy, come, and he didn't come immediately, not immediate. The most concerning thing, though, is the last line. A dog not meeting these requirements will be considered running at large under 26 Code of Federal Regulations, section whatever. The reason why this is concerning is if you go to that Code of Regulations, in the Code of Regulations, what it says is pets running at large may be impounded. Now, what this is clearly, as you read the rest of it, is intended to be a dog that is running wild. It got loose from the house, nobody's around taking care of it, or it got away from its handler, there's nobody around under control. It's a dog that's running at large. That's not the same thing as a dog running off leash with the owner 5 feet away or 10 feet away or something like that. And yet, even just the idea, why did they even bother to mention that in this section on voice control, except that they want to have this potential being able to say, if your dog doesn't come immediate enough, we can impound it. And that's very concerning, and certainly seems intended to harass people with dogs. There's a few other changes up in Marin County at Muir Beach, Rodeo Beach. There's some changes that would restrict access on the western end of the beaches, certain times, most of the year actually. If both of those places like a lagoon and creeks, and then it comes into and runs into the ocean. During certain times of the year, the water connects those two. There's water flowing between the ocean and the lagoon, and then up the creeks. And the concern is about salmon that would be doing a run. But it's not entirely clear why. So what they want to do is when the water is connecting the two, they want to say no dogs, no people, nobody can go through the water. And it's not a deep water at any place. And so the question is that going to? There's no indication in the compendium how that's going to make a difference, how they're going to enforce it. They put up fences, they're going to have somebody standing there. And there's a lot of concern by a lot of people that it's going to be unfairly enforced. That they will use it to enforce against somebody with a dog, but they will not use it to enforce against somebody just walking by themselves that crosses this area, this water, or that someone with a kid who does the same thing. And so that, again, it's controversial and therefore shouldn't be done by a compendium. They also want to require that dogs wear or display licenses or license tags. Now, of course, dogs should be licensed. No one is debating that. But not everybody keeps the license on their dog. And then it also bans commercial dog walking in every place in San Mateo County. And that doesn't quite seem fair. It's allowed in San Francisco and Marin counties if you have a permit. Their argument is that they've never allowed it. They claim that it was banned, but actually it was never decided. It was basically, it's been in limbo for years. And so this is a significant change because now it's gone from being in limbo to being a ban. And then they did designate only 8 sites in the entire GGRA where you can have First Amendment activities like rallies, marches, distributing root materials, and none of those places are in San Mateo County. So what we're asking is the Commission to send letters to the Board of Supervisors, the Mayor, and the GGRA that you oppose these changes to dog walking that are made in the 2019 compendium, and ask the GGRA to remove all those changes before they implement the compendium. Excuse me. So the problem is that they have extended, it's not really a public comment period because it's not an official comment period. It's a public awareness period where they're letting you know what they plan to do. And you can comment on it, which is what people are doing. In a normal notice and comment period, they would be required to analyze everybody's comments and to respond to them, either to accept the change that someone suggests or to give you an actual reason why they don't need to accept the change. So it's very much they have to respond to the comments. That's not an effect here. However, we're still asking people to comment and to send in comments because if nothing else, it can show the Park Service as well as our elected officials, and if it ends up in court, the judges and things, that these are in fact significant and controversial changes. And the more people that comment, the more easy it is to make that claim. They extended the period for these public comments, I use that term somewhat lightly, until November 27th. So you have until, I think that's the 26th is Tuesday. So you have a Tuesday night to send your comments in. So we're hoping, and where you send it is to the bottom, GOPA, which is Golden Gate, public affairs at nps.gov. So that's basically our hope, that you'd be willing to send in just a comment just saying that you're concerned about what you've heard, and you're asking them to remove the changes. And the rest of the compendium has nothing to do with dog walk. In fact, the vast majority of it has nothing. A lot of it has to do with things like vaping, which is new, e-bikes. They have a whole section on e-bikes and where they can be allowed and not allowed, that sort of thing. So this is a very minor thing to pull just the dog stuff out. So that's basically what we're asking. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
First, I'd like to remind commissioners that, especially the new commissioners, we as a commission can write a letter as a commission to the Board of Supervisors, but anyone on the commission can also write a letter as an individual expressing their concern. So just wanted to put that out there as a reminder to people. Thank you very much, Sally, for this important presentation. I have a couple of questions for you. I'm really surprised about the First Amendment activities. And is the ACLU involved in this? Because I think that they've had rallies. Like I want to say Bernie Sanders had a rally, right?
And the place where he had the rally would not be allowed. They're trying to say now that you can apply for a permit anywhere to do an activity anywhere that you generate. But there's a couple places, these 8 places, where it sounds like you can do it without necessarily getting a permit, but that's not even entirely. So it's completely muddy as to what they're actually doing with it. There's a National Lawyers, I can't say the name of it, I think it's like National Lawyers Guild or something like that, which has actually written a letter opposing the First Amendment restrictions. And most places, like the people that do the impeach things on Ocean Beach, where they set up a big drone and they have everybody, they have like 500 people that spell out the word impeach. That would not be allowed according to what it says in because Ocean Beach is not a site.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that. I'm wondering when you noticed that the sensitive restoration area signs had been changed and that area had been expanded, did they even try to explain that there was bird nesting? I mean, was there any sort of rhyme or reason, or it just that one day the new signage and limitations popped up?
It wasn't actually, it's not actually quite the way it worked. They had closed that area back in the late 90s, and they just said, we don't want you going in there. And they put up some fences, but the fences are just real fences, so the dogs go through them, and a lot of dogs go through it anyway. But they never went through an actual process. Then when they wanted to close an additional area, which is what's now called the Habitat Protection Area, they actually went to, people with dogs sued, dog groups sued, and the judges said, no, you gotta go through a public notice and comment process, which they did, and they then closed even more area. But that initial 5 acres, it's actually 5 acres, was a small area beneath that was new in the 2019 pending. That was not included in the notice and comment. So they were just assuming that that was okay because it had not been actively challenged back in 95 or 96 when it was done. And so but it's a new, so this is a new, this basically is legalizing it without going through again. They have to do that kind of a closure, they have to do a public notice and comment when they have it. There's also another area at Fort Funston that is near the, there's a, it's in the lower right corner, there's an area, there's a little parking lot, and there's an administrative building. They want to close some dog walk in there. I think it's an area where people don't necessarily walk a lot of their dogs, but again, it's still a change that should go through notice and comment as opposed to just administrative fiat.
And then finally, so you say that small area that was added on is only 5 acres, but 5 acres is, my dog would be very happy on 5 acres running around.
If you walked at Fort Funston, more than likely your dog has been in that area.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's just like a fence, some of which is overrun by sand, but some of which is just like, two poles, and dogs can go through it and under it and that sort of thing.
Well,
and children as well.
And that leads to my final question, which is, has anyone amongst your group gone to the trouble of calculating how many miles of trails have been closed? I'm struck by, the scale. It's very hard to understand the scale of this, and it sounds like it's miles and miles of trails.
It's probably not miles and miles. The trail closures are primarily in San Mateo County. And it turns out that at Milagro Ridge, there's one that at the very top of this little thing that says Milagro Creek Overlook Trail. That's the one that they really are insisting they want to close. And it's because of habitat for the Mission Blue Butterfly. And when we asked them, did you consider just, because we like certain bush, and have you considered like putting a fence around the bush to keep people and dogs away from it? And they said, no, we didn't really think about that. And the problem is that the federal regulations actually require them to say why less restrictive measures will not be sufficient. And so they clearly didn't even consider a less restrictive measure in this case. With North Coast Water District land, again, and when they were in the dog management plan, they were saying, yep, yeah, you can walk your dogs there. And now they're saying, we don't own that, so we can't control it. So that's a little bit of confusion as to why they're claiming that but they're now trying to say that that might actually not be the case, that you may in fact be able to walk your dogs there still. But again, it's not on the map that the public has a chance to look at. One of the issues that we had was that one of the rationale that was given when people submitted some of the early comments was that they needed to clarify some of the maps. And so that's why they did all these maps. And then later on, we were told by a person who's fairly high up in the parks or in the GGNRA that these maps are only illustrative, that we actually will create other maps that we'll give to the public. And so it's like, well, wait a minute, you're showing this, and so, I guess if there was a lot of trust, we might say, okay, we trust that you will write the changes. They have indicated they might be willing to add some in the legend of these maps in San Mateo County, something that would clarify some of these issues. But is there a lot of trust that that will happen and that it will happen in a way that we approve of or agree with? That trust, unfortunately, is not there. But it's probably on the order of, you can see like at the bottom of this map, it looks like that one trail, that overlook trail, is maybe about 500 feet or 1,000 feet, something like that at the most. So it may not be miles and miles and miles of trails that are being restricted.
Thank you. Are there other commissioners, other questions?
Yeah, I guess, sorry, could you just clarify the dates again, other than the November 27th? When does the compendium become, what's their hope for when they would be just slide through?
What they've always said is that once the public awareness period ends, it will be signed and then it's official. So if they say that they're taking comments as part of this public awareness period up to November 27th, they could sign it November 27th. That's what we frankly expect them to do. Whether they do or not, we don't know. But that's what they in the past have generally done. Is when they said because normally in a regular notice and comment period, they would be required to analyze all the comments they got, even up to their deadline. But because this is not a regular notice and comment period, that's not too confusing. They're not required to do that. So they're just required to take the comments, oh, we're listening, we want to know what you have to say, but that doesn't mean that they're not required to analyze the comments at all. So there's no time needed to do anything once the comment period ends, public awareness period ends, they could sign it immediately the next day. Whether they actually start implementing some of these changes, like, for example, the going up to people and saying, stop and demand, give me, show me your immediate recall, that I can't say as to whether that would happen immediately or not.
So what is the point of soliciting public feedback and then not reporting back on what you found?
They basically are, I think they're required to let people know what they're planning to do. And that's what they did when they released this right before Labor Day. And then they do take comments on it, but they just, in theory, they could make some changes. And we're hopeful that they will. Whether they will or not, or they're not required to, but we're hopeful that they will realize that what they're doing, some of these changes with dog walking are significant and highly controversial. And therefore, they can't be done through this process. If not, we are actually, our lawyers are looking at it, and it's possible this will end up in court as well, as before. I mean, nobody wants to go that way. That costs everybody, and it's not good. But if we have to, we will.
Quick question. They are doing public awareness instead of the official public comment. They're able to do that because they're pushing it through as a compendium and not an official plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. A compendium is essentially an administrative decision. It's an administrative thing. Yeah. That's why it's supposed to be for minor things that nobody's not really going to get upset about.
With the data from private servers and the prior public discussions and comments, do we know who the entities or individuals are that are pushing for change and what their motivations are at this point?
Traditionally, the people who have been pushing the most, the Park Service the most to get to restrict dog walking, and especially off-leash access, have been the local environmental groups. Audubon, National Parks Conservation Association, I think it's called, Sierra Club, the local Sierra Club, the Center for Biological Diversity, and groups like that. And the rationale for that has been the concern of protecting the environment from the dogs. The problem with that, and what happened with all the years' worth of the dog management plan process, was that the Park Service could not show any evidence of that having off-leash dog walking in any of the places in the GGNRA was causing the problems that people were concerned about. There's evidence that, this is not a remote wilderness where animals have been, the wildlife has grown up without ever seeing a dog, and suddenly a dog comes in and they freak out or whatever, think it's a predator, that sort of thing. That's not this is an urban recreation area. This is an area where there has not historically, Fort Funston, for example, was a military base. Under the parking lot was a Nike missile base. It's actually apparently still there. And so these were not pristine wilderness. It's been highly modified, and so they have been, one of the reasons why they want to say a sensitive restoration area at Fort Funston is not that there's anything being protected there, but that they want to add things. They want to put things that are not there now. They want to put in species that they want to protect. And again, nobody's necessarily saying that's a bad thing. It's just a question. This is a national recreation area in an urban area. I mean, this is parts of the GGNRA are within a city of 800,000 people. So this is not like your usual Park Service land. Crater Lake or Yellowstone or something like that. And so it's kind of a different beast, so to speak, of what they're trying to do here. And they're trying to basically manage it as if it was Crater Lake or a pristine remote wilderness, and it isn't. But even if you acknowledge that they have a right to do it that way, they did not, in the 8 years of the dog management plan, they did not present any evidence that there was any problem with dogs and cause with either wildlife, plants, or safety concerns with humans or wildlife or anything like that. So it's, it was a problem that they argued could exist, but they could not show that it actually did. And so we argued you can't make the significant change compared to the 79 pet policy, which did come about as a result of a notice and comment period, for something which might happen when there's been ample time to see whether it actually has and yet not been able to show it.
Any further comments from commissioners? Questions? Okay, then do we, I want to make a movement to, I propose that we write a letter to the Board of Supervisors opposing this, not just the plan, but the process of making these changes to our Board of Supervisors. I suggest we send a letter in support of SF Dog and in opposition of the changes. Everyone?
I second that.
All in favor of sending a letter of support for this opposition? Or letter of opposition? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Anyone opposed? No, okay. So, as you may know, what we'll do now is we will not craft a letter at this point, but we will ask.
You do need to take public comment on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Right. But we would, thank you, Sally. We will, we can craft a letter outside of this meeting, and we can send it along to all of the supervisors of the Board of Supervisors. And I think we might go back to the previous letter we sent concerning the GGNRA and use similar language. And if everyone's okay with doing that without reviewing it, and then we can send it around to all the commissioners and send it. I think it's probably important that we do it quickly and not wait until our January meeting.
Okay. So I have the original letter.
Okay.
Just change the date.
Yeah. Just right. Yeah. Just maybe reiterate some of these concerns, and I'd be happy to work on it with you and Sally.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll send it to you after I've made some changes.
Right. Okay. We're good. Thank you. And now, is there public comment regarding this issue? Please come forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ann Rocket. I'm also with SF Dog. Only just to add to Sally's presentation, I wanted to remind folks that currently the lands where dogs are currently allowed of the GGNRA is only 1% of their overall acreage, which is hundreds of thousands of acres, right? So them restricting even that 1% is really big to us. And secondly, the deadline for comments to them is the 27th of this month. The purpose, even though it's not official on their end, is so that we can demonstrate significant opposition to their illegal and unlawful changes. That's it.
Is there more public comment?
Okay, I just wanted to say really quick, I think you made a really good point, and I think Sally really did an incredible job of doing her homework there. This issue came up 25 years ago when the Animal Commission's meetings were held at the Terrebonne Police Station. And the thing that really disturbed me then was that the Audubon Society was there, and they were saying basically that on Ocean Beach, when the western snowy plover birds were nesting, the dogs would chase them, and they'd lose energy that they needed to nest, and they'd fly away, and then, you know, if they're migratory birds, whatever. That was a concern. And then you had the dog people that were there and were saying, you know, with great validity, you know, dogs need off-leash space to run. You know, you can't have them on a leash all the time. But the thing that really concerned me was that it was a very polarized issue. It seemed like the bird people didn't care about the dogs, and the dog people didn't care about the birds. And to me, if you love animals, you love them all. So the bottom line is that the National Park Service is very native. So given that the bird, you know, and then they were talking about the bank swallows that were nesting at Fort Funston, given that the birds cannot move, then you have to create more areas for the dogs and not just, you know, close off all these areas, but at the same time you have to care, you know, be concerned about the birds. So, you know, I think we can do both here and show that we're concerned about both animals. And I think, as you said, the Park Service should be more, explaining, these are the birds here, they're nesting at this time of year and whatever. And I think that would be a win-win situation.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Thank you. So we will get that letter sent it out to commissioners and send it to the Board of Supervisors. Okay, thank you. Moving on to election of officers. The commission will elect new officers. We've had a couple of commissioners join, and it is time to select new officers for our commission. We have a chairperson who runs the meetings and who's the main liaison with other entities within our government and community. There is the vice chairperson who primarily takes over the role of the chairperson when the chairperson is unavailable. And then finally there is the secretary who's required to post the agenda before meetings and to post follow-up information after meetings. And so those are the three officer posts that we will be electing for this evening. I would like to propose that the chairperson be Nina Irani, who is new to our commission, but who has already demonstrated an ability to not only take fastidious notes and be present and active on the commission, but to show real concern for a variety of issues that have been presented to our commission. I think she would be a great chairperson, and I would be honored if she would take over the controls from me. And so I would like to nominate Chairperson Irani as Commissioner Irani as the chairperson. Would anyone
I second that.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
No opposition?
I don't have opposition, I just want to know if that's something you'd be willing to take on.
Yes, I would, and I appreciate everyone's support very much.
And
thank you.
you don't want to do it anymore, Anne-Marie?
I've had some family issues, and
it's really a rhetorical question.
It's taxing. I thought it would be. I thought some fresh energy and perspective would be good for the commission. So, all in favor? Aye. Yes.
Aye.
Yes. Okay. So, you'll be the new chairperson. Thank you so much for agreeing to do that, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. Then, secondly, we have the vice chairperson, who has been. Russell has been the vice chairperson. He can continue that, or if anyone would like to nominate someone else, you may do so.
Can I ask one, would it be possible in this transition period, since you're so familiar with that, for you to hold vice chair for a bit or some succession piece? And Russell, you're like vice, but I mean, we come to the point, are you opposed to that?
I'm fine with being vice chair. You can certainly help Nina with her duties and not have a technical position.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think
That's very fair with
there's
me.
really an issue there.
All right, I just want to make sure there's a succession plan and that Nina feels fully supported in taking on this role.
Great. So then, with that said, I would like to nominate Russell Janowski as vice chairperson to continue his role in that capacity.
I second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Thank you. Finally, secretary, I would like to nominate Commissioner Torres as the secretary. He's already been so helpful on the technology front.
He has a PC.
He has a PC. Not only does he seem competent, but also willing to take on this position from what I have seen. And I ask you, is that true? Would you be willing to take on the position of secretary?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to nominate Commissioner Torres as secretary. All in can I get a motion? Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No, seeing none. Okay, so those are our new officials. Thank you all very much for your service, and I'm honored to serve with you. Is there any public comment on this issue? None. All right, moving on to review of the sunshine rules. Discussion about how sunshine rules apply to commissioners' communications with each other and outside of the commission. This is a topic that comes up regularly, and it's always good to review it when new commissioners come on board. We have a requirement. There was a training of, what do you call it, a training? There's a training video that commissioners are required to participate in. when they come on the commission. So all of us should be familiar with the rules, but it's worth stating publicly some of the important ones that we adhere to and must adhere to. And specifically, the question of communication amongst commissioners.